This is my home. Some of you know me, many of you don't, so you can hear from me anytime, quite frankly. You've heard from me in the past, you can hear from me anytime. So I really want to give the bulk of the time to Helen, and I'm just going to let her take it. So I'm simply going to introduce her and then get out of the way. Helen Elaine Lee is a graduate of Harvard College and Harvard Law School. Her first novel, The Serpent's Gift, was published by Anetheum, and her second, Watermarked, was published by Scribner. These are very impressive publishers, by the way, let me tell you. Her short stories have appeared in Plowshares, Prairie Schooner, Callaloo, Solstice Literary Magazine, and Best African American Fiction 2009. Her novel, Pomegranate, published in 2023 by Simon & Schuster's Atria Books, was long listed for the Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction, won the Publishing Triangle 2024 Farrow Grumley Award for LGBTQ fiction, and was a finalist for the 2024 Lambda Literary Award for Lesbian Fiction. It was also named one of the 20 best books of 2023 by Amazon. The novel's journey of healing follows Renita Atwater as she gets out of prison after a 4-year bid for opiate possession and strives to stay clean, repair her relationship with her kids, grapple with the past, and both own and tell her story. Helen is a professor, or I think was until very recently, because I'm jealous, she retired. She was a recently retired professor of comparative media and media studies and writing at MIT. And I just want to say I know Helen. Helen actually helped me get tenure. So, right, you wrote a letter for me to get tenure. The Boston Black writing community is very small, and Helen is one of its pillars. She is a truly wonderful woman, and I am delighted to welcome her to our beloved Union.
Oh, thank you. Let's see. Everybody hear me? Thank you, Kim. And Kim is a wonderful fiction writer and essayist whose work I've long admired. So I'm honored to be a part of this community of healers today, and I'm especially grateful to Karen Singleton for inviting me. So I'm here in the name of story and its power to inspire resistance and healing. Stories have been the transformative thread through my life. Growing up, I sat with my mother while she read to me, and as I listened, the world magically widened and came alive. She showed me the communion and challenges offered by literature and instilled in me an ethic of venturing. He wanted Sonny to strike out for deep water, she read from James Baldwin's Sonny's Blues, and we talked about what the differences might be for us between deep water and drowning. We discussed the role of the witness and the need to raise one's voice. I carry those afternoons by my mother's side, spent with so many literary characters, into every experience. And indeed, with the help of the stories, written and oral, on which I had been fed, I found my way to writing fiction after becoming a lawyer. And writing continues to be the driving force in my life. Through writing, we have the opportunity to live with mystery and wonder, to divine what matters in our lives and in the larger world, and to speak the things that have been bound by silence, which is especially critical for Black women, for queer Black women, and for Black trans people. I'm interested always in how people pull light from darkness, in how we renew and reinvent ourselves. And in each thing I write, I explore memory and grappling with the past, the role of narrative in our lives, and making art from loss. Today, I'm going to read 3 short excerpts from my novel, Pomegranate, and first I'll give you a little bit of background. In this novel, Renita Atwater tells her story, as Kim said, of getting out of prison after a 4-year bid for opiate possession and trying to stay clean, regain custody of her kids from the aunties who've raised them, own her love for a woman on the inside who's helped to inspire her, and grapple to accept and tell her full and complex story, to choose life, in other words. And Renita's present tense journey after getting out of prison is intercut with pieces of the history that inform her journey. While my mother gave me stories to see by, my father, who was a criminal defense attorney, instilled in me an understanding that everyone has a complex and important story. Many people grow up without love or opportunity or choices, and justice is a fiction for some of us. And although his work meant that those caught in the criminal legal system were not distant or invisible to me, I needed to find a way to earn the story of imprisonment that I wanted to try to tell. Pomegranate grew out of many years of volunteering in a range of places, in prisons and houses of correction, where I led creative writing sessions, and then helped to establish a creative writing workshop through Penn New England, which I believe Kim was a part of for a while. And I also volunteered at shelters for homeless people and with cancer patients and with people who are transitioning from prison. Through the workshops that I did inside of prisons and houses of correction, I was transformed by what people had endured, by the survival of dignity, the practice of communal analysis and brainstorming. I was moved by the generosity and self-interrogation that I witnessed. For those writers behind the walls, telling their stories was an assertion of visibility, of meaning, of their humanity. Writing was, and always can be, an act of recovery and constructive defiance. In the dehumanizing environment of prison, with the layered history of suffering and loss experienced by so many who are locked up, reading and writing are means of psychic survival. They help people to ask, what if? And through writing stories and poems and essays, imprisoned people are asserting that they are more than the worst things that have happened to them and the worst things they have done. They are actively revising their writing and their lives. In Pomegranate, I wanted to examine experiences, generational, historical, contemporary, that have been wounding, especially for Black women, and also to depict forces that have been sustaining and healing. As the framework for Renita's journey is the emotional and psychological toll of this society's retributive carceral and criminal legal systems, I wanted to make readers feel the deprivation and brutality that Renita, her fellow imprisoned women, and their families and communities experience. And I wanted to embody certain realities. A 2016 Vera Institute of Justice study found that 86% of incarcerated women had experienced sexual violence. 82% had struggled with addiction, and nearly 80% were mothers. I wanted to show how addiction and trauma and sexual violence paved the way to imprisonment, and I wanted to connect the trauma of imprisonment to this society's history of enslavement, exclusion, disenfranchisement, exploitation, and racial violence. And I wanted to show a spirit of resistance that is healing, empowering, and ongoing, and that is a fundamental aspect of the story of Black survival in this country and throughout the diaspora. The forces of story, collective action, kinship, imagination, nature, creative expression, love, that have always inspired us to make a way out of no way. These are dark times in this country and the world over for freedom and for autonomy, bodily, psychic, political, spiritual. With whatever means we have, we're called upon to be warriors, working together, raising our voices, crafting our counter-narratives, reimagining the world and ourselves, to resist the authoritarian forces of domination and control in the forms of white supremacy, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, economic exclusion and exploitation, cultural erasure. And it's worth noting that the efforts of the current administration to erase and corrupt Black history is a testament to its power to unite, galvanize, and inspire defiance. We must resist with our very humanity, with our love, with our bodies, with our stories. The practice of writing is a form of resistance. It says, the story that comes through me, through what has happened to me and my peoples, and that expresses my angle of vision and my imagination and insight matters. It matters enough that I will brave the uncertainty and difficulty of the undertaking with the risk and faith and exposure entailed, and it cannot be extinguished or erased. The writing practice transforms us, asking that we pay attention, dream, criticize, take the world in through our senses, through our whole unique and complicated selves. Asking that we receive the stories that surround us, those being lived by other people and yearning to be told. That we read our own lives for meaning, and that we embrace writing as a process and revise, meaning to re-see. Writing fiction is also a means of activism, at once celebratory and subversive, as it asks us to examine our lives and society and imagine the world differently. Through story, we move via identification and empathy toward understanding and compassion for ourselves and for people whose lives are different from our own. A story is an outstretched hand. Come with me, enter this world with me. Take up residence here as I tell you about this woman named Renita and her pomegranate heart. So the first excerpt is the beginning of chapter 3. In chapters 1 and 2, Renita is getting out of Oak Hill's prison and making her way to her Aunt Jessie's place. And now in chapter 3, we go back 4 years to when she began her sentence. So, and forgive me in advance for cursing in the sanctuary. Okay, so this is chapter 3, Oak Hills, 2015. When morning broke, Renita heard fitful stirring from the bunk below. Along with all the women down the tier, she roused beneath the scratchy wool blanket that had covered countless other bodies and faced the real. Another day of human debt. Still, mornings were beginnings, weren't they? The nights began with limbo as darkness briefly tempered and then amplified the sounds of grief and fear and rage. And before things quieted to a low rumble of pain, she and everyone else at Oak Hills tried to refuse the noise and imagine a way out of no way. Just before sleep, most everything they depended on, outside and in, was burned away. Their threads and bling and cribs and rides, their weaves and manicures, their thick hips and cleavage and supple skin, their reputations and posturing and excuses, their legal analyses, the stories they spun and told about themselves, their legal analysis, the stories they spun and told about themselves, their charms in bed and service as adornments on someone's arm, their game, their talents for conversating and living large and staying alpha or beta, the jobs and comfort and respectability they might have known, the kids and kin who carried on a world apart, gone. And it was down to their gods and what was buried in their hearts to see them through to morning. All day they hungered and prayed the night would bring them peace. But for most, safety was a mere concept, and the night offered neither asylum nor forgiveness. In the dark lurked those who'd stolen innocence and trust. In the dark, past became present. Some things they tried to remember: the sudden light of fireflies, daylilies, hopscotch, trees, and the things that remembered them uncoiled like ferns, elbowing out of winter mounds to unfurl their serrated blades. They went over their if-onlys. If only I'd been born on a different block. If only I'd said no or yes. If only I'd never met him. If only I'd been stronger, braver, better, cleaner. If only I'd stayed home. If only home had been different than it was. If only, if only, if only I'd been more and less. For some, sleep finally came, and for those who were nightmare-free, there was temporary freedom. Either way, morning followed, and they woke to find that they were still captive. The first thing Renita thought on waking was that she'd been inside for over 3 months. Spring was lost to her. March, April, and May, gone. In one way, it seemed like each empty and lonely minute had passed at a slow crawl, and at the same time, she'd been through enough for a lifetime. Before taking on the fluorescent light of day, she spent a moment picturing herself up high in the spokes of the pine tree back home that she'd named Avery. Opening her eyes, she could tell by the striated light that it was nearly 6, and she could feel it coming, the morning count, when her body would stand and present itself. The heart keeps beating, that's what her father had always said. She thought how they ought to give out chips for surviving prison. For 90 days in NA, you got a green one, and she tried to imagine how it would feel to collect little bits of color for just keeping alive at Oak Hills, where everything except their skins was gray. On the van trip there, she'd squinted through window grating to see dormant orchards and pondside cabins and rolling hills slide by, pastel ranch houses and colonials with gazebos and jungle gyms, red, white, and blue on porch front flagpoles, children playing in the snow and running free. The van drove past all of that to where people either couldn't fight living with the prison or needed the jobs it would bring, far away until the houses got smaller and smaller and the cars older and older, and everything man-made was rusted and weathered against a backdrop of majestic hills and woods until it reached Oak Hills, far away from family, in the midst of all those evergreens they couldn't touch. The van had made its way through concentric walls and fences topped with coiled razor wire, and she'd stumbled off in ankle chains, surrounded by COs who couldn't have been less interested in her struggle to right herself, as winter blew through her orange jumpsuit and a cluster of geese looked on in wary curiosity. On floor buffing detail in an office 3 stories up, Naomi had chuckled as she watched her stumble, though she'd nearly fallen herself, stepping from the van a year before. She watched the door swallow Renita. A young poet coming in to lead a workshop saw the empty van drive away, another sister down. The chaplain saw her coming in as he was going out, another soul in need of sustenance. And C.O. Stewart pointed the way into reception and departure, another offender to be corrected. "Welcome to Oak Hills," he barked, "your home away from home." Renita heard the unspoken bitch in his tone and tried for the pride that had been sewn into her, or for contempt as big as his. But dignity was hard to come by when you shuffled forward in chains. She held her head up and tried to look straight ahead, but on the inside she was starting to unravel. Riding the tail end of the high she'd managed to score before leaving the downtown jail, she knew she'd either have to find a source and fix or surrender to the agonies. Like others before her, she tried to leave behind her body as she parted and lifted and bent and spread and squatted and opened herself. She tried to disappear as her skin burned from the delousing soap and she shivered from the icy shower. By the time her name was replaced with a number and she was dressed down and photographed, she had started shaking. And then she was marched to the holding cell where the fresh catch waited to join the general population. Back at the jail, she'd known some faces from around the way, but here she was on her own. Some in the tank looked menacing, some looked scared, some looked too stoned or strung out to be threats, and she knew she was headed in one of those 2 directions. "What they say you did," one asked with a smile that might be sisterly or not. Renita was inside the walls where the future had been settled, and she'd be getting retribution instead of help, where everyone was in the process of surrender to someone or something. That night, she gripped the tiny bar of soap and the stunted, flaccid toothbrush she'd been given, hurtful reminders of the daily, and mourned the sweet release of dope. Lying curled and fetal above Naomi, she surrendered to darkness and memory and began to kick. Jerking like a tangled marionette, no methadone, no Suboxone to be had, she gave in to the vomiting, the shitting, the hot and cold flashes, the shaking and cursing and begging for deliverance. She kept picturing the busted Budweiser King of Beers sign at Mario's Paradise Lounge, just like that, strung together with neon tubing, sections blown and sputtering. She flashed the news, "Help me, I am broke way down." She survived the bone-deep ache and the crawling skin, the incandescent pain from just brushing her hair, the bottomless misery as the beast crawled out of her and she came around the turn. And when the haze began to lift, she felt each aching muscle, each joint, and each remembered sin. Coming out of the blind, stumbling fog to the truth of where she'd been, of what she'd done and not done, she saw herself and tried to bear the shame. She worked on shrinking her yearning and containing the cry that rose each time the cell door locked. She tried to choose sight when the real came back with a focus so clear and sharp that even the beautiful things hurt. She saw a red-tailed hawk from the window and had to close her eyes. Eyes open or shut, she could smell the burn and feel the liftoff as the dope entered her bloodstream, could imagine her joints loosening and the rhythm of her body slowing, smoothing out as she slid into the warm mind, body, soul, womb hug from the universe that she'd never be able to forget. God, how she wanted relief, and she knew where to get it. She'd seen the packets kicked under cell doors, and she knew which ones, the imprisoned and their guards, had access to the greatest escape of all. Still, here she was, a 90-day double survivor, and that was something. And there it was, the loudspeaker command. She stood and stepped forward, saying, "Here, present, 51673 Atwater, counted, checked, verified." Afterward, all down the tier, women dressed while waiting for their cellies to finish up at the contraption that was toilet on the bottom, sink on top, and all one piece. By silent arrangement, while one relieved herself, the other turned to face the wall. Then came the order for movement, and they went to chow. 8 hours later, after breakfast and work detail and another standing count and lunch, it was recreation time. And following the order to relax and socialize, they filed into the day room and tried to make this hour matter, or at least to help it pass, under the steady gaze of their keepers. Some walked laps around the yard, and some drifted like flotsam, disconnected, unclaimed. Some waited to use the phone that cost so much it bled their families even poorer, trying to unsee how the one at the head of the line looked even more heartsick when she hung up than before she'd dialed. Folks were gathered by the TV, tuning into The Young and the Restless or Days of Our Lives. One woman got so worked up about the storyline, she yelled at the top of her voice about who was honest, who was faithful, who was about to get betrayed. Now and again, war broke out over what story to follow, whether some character or another was dead for real, or someone argued for a switch-up from the drama of an up-close-at-a-distance talk show feast of lives turned inside out. But today, things were placid in TV land. Someone was writing a letter. Someone was drawing a picture. Someone was writing a poem. Okay, so that's the first by a third of that chapter. So in that section, I hope you feel the struggle to be human and complex and defiant and hopeful, within the context of confinement and state authority. So next I want to read a piece from deeper into the novel, a counterpoint. As I wrote and revised, which is what writing is, I knew that Renita would need to have certain resources that would give her the chance of thriving. And she has a love of novels, which have always sustained and freed her, and a wide-ranging intellectual curiosity, inspired in part by the game she played with her father of sharing things they learned from their set of encyclopedias. She has family support, a grounding in the stories of her people, a Black feminist liberatory politics that's deepened by Maxine, and a bond with the psychotherapist whom she at first sees as merely a mandated hurdle in the process of family reunification, but who comes to be instrumental in her healing. And she has the makings of community. But one of her greatest resources is a deep attunement to the natural world. And she has a special love of trees. And the practice also inspired by Maxine of recognizing and naming what they call the free things in the world that don't depend on power or permission, things like the smell of new cut grass or skipping stones or a curl of white birch bark. So this short flashback chapter. It appears late in the book when Renita's journey is well underway. And in an early scene, we saw the wounding effects of her mother's emotional invalidation of her, of what Renita experienced as a kind of erasure at the age of 11. But buried is the aftermath of that experience, which comes to the surface through her work with the psychotherapist. And she's carried the experience within. It's been there as a kind of underground aquifer, tacitly sustaining her and showing her and the reader as it resurfaces that she is and has been attuned to life and freedom and joy, and that she's more than her pain and trauma. So this is chapter 32. It's set in 1996. Renita woke to the sound of rain that had built from early evening drizzle to steady drumbeat. Pulling off her sleeping scarf, she shook her hair loose and got up, enjoying the feel of the smooth, worn floorboards on her bare feet, to go to the window. Heart still aching from her mother's dinner-time cruelty, she unlocked and lifted it, and a room filled with the sense of pine and soil and rain. Leaning on the sill, she stretched out her hands to feel the wetness and let her eyes feast on the dreamlike yard, the little brick patio she'd helped make, Avery and Devon, both trees, grass unmown as she preferred it, and side-by-side garden plots, hers and her father's. The dark's protection was nearly complete, a fingernail moon helping to keep the secret of the lush backyard miracle. And though she couldn't see them from her window, her seedlings were out there, soaking up the wetness, becoming food for the eyes and soul. Anchored by their spreading roots and pushing above as well as below ground. She imagined the other sentient beings that were out there, unnoticed, hidden, some too small to see. She slipped downstairs, treading lightly, unlocked the back door and eased it open, and stood just inside, feeling every sense wake up. She put one bare foot on the threshold and paused. What kind of craziness was this? She couldn't even imagine what punishment her mother would devise. Stepping through the doorway, Renita went to Avery and looked through the green that lately seemed to call her up. Soon, she told the tree, I'll be with you soon. Standing beneath the arcing branches, she watched the water drip from their tips while she stayed dry. And then she stepped from Avery's shelter into the rain. Immersed and unfolding, coming into fullness, she began to dance. Moving to the pulse of the water, she raised her arms, opened her hands, moved her feet and legs, stomping and hopping, prancing and dipping, winding from the waist. She swung her head, scattering raindrops from her hair. She spun, reveling in the abundance of her body, rejoicing in the elemental force that had summoned her from the confines of the house and soaked her to the skin. What kind of dance was this? She let the question go and moved past thinking into reclamation, taking her place with all that she could see and not see, with the earth and the trees and all the other hearts beating in the dark alongside hers, with the rain, the sky, the night. Okay, so with this last excerpt, I'm going to leave you with the possibility that exists alongside loss, and both those polarity, those two things are threaded through her journey of healing, self-acceptance, and autonomy, and those things are threaded through all of our lives, right? There are always a lot of ways to talk about what a book's about, but I guess for me, thematically, this book is about loss and possibility. So here's the opening or preface. It's short, and it functions as a kind of what like all prefaces, I guess, as a kind of thematic lens through which to read the novel. So I'll read this and then you'll be free to go. Okay. Mama was gone and not gone. She had disappeared into the hospital while Renita was at school, getting tamed and stuffed with facts and equations, and there she lay, immobilized by tubes and wires. Renita had stood beside her hospital bed, watching the blue ventilator bag fill and empty, trying to understand how Geneva Atwater had been felled by something as tiny as a blood clot. She had seen her dying, and after the mourners filed past Renita at the wake, grateful for the phrase that helped them navigate the sudden woe, sorry, so sorry for your loss, she had stood beside the coffin and stared at her mother, lying in its white satin folds like a parody of a fancy gift box display. The shiny wig Daddy knew she would have wanted, low on her forehead like a helmet, skin waxy and mouth pressed shut, eyes closed to her for good now. She had seen her dead, but she heard her mother's voice in the back door alcove at the table in the basement, and now she would never please her, never tell her what she was keeping inside, never love her more than she feared her. A month after the funeral, she sat across from Auntie Jessie, picking at one of the casseroles the church ladies kept bringing. She'd brought a book to the table, which had never been allowed, but there were fewer shouts and shout-nots now that Jessie had joined Daddy at the house until things eased up. He stretched out work as long as possible and escaped to go fishing on the weekends, and both he and Jessie tried to stave off the bloated gloom with food, encyclopedia facts, artificial cheer. Neither one talked about Geneva. Neither one asked Renita about her sadness. That was the family way, and what hurt kept haunting like a hungry ghost. She heard the front door open and close, and there was Daddy in the archway, smiling like a moonlighting jester, chuckling from his belly like he was launching a magic trick. He pulled a dented orb from a brown paper bag, and Renita told herself to smile. She'd seen photos and drawings of pomegranates, but not a real one. Where'd you get that, she asked, more edgy than she intended, and his smile wobbled. Your birthday getting lost in the shuffle and whatnot, I thought, he began. She looked away. Eclipse was more like it. He put the fruit in her hands. There's no making up for what's past, but this here, it's got some surprising and wonderful news buried just inside. Expecting a whole lot of nothing, her fingers studied the scratched and ordinary skin. He said they should wait to open it. Sometimes waiting made things better. You hungry, Lennox? Auntie Jessie asked, getting him a plate and listening as he told about the engine repairs and paint restorations that had filled his day. She kept him chattering while Renita muted their voices in her head, turning the pomegranate to take in its flat and faded spots, pressing on the sharp crown at the top. And when she was about to get up and wait on something else, he said, let's open it. Renita peeled back the rind and pried the bloodshot gems from the spongy membrane that held the whole thing together. She was struck silent, awed by the wild design of it and by the little bursts of sour sweet juice from the seeds that turned her fingers red. There was a whole world, strange and crazy beautiful underneath the skin, layer on crooked layer of ruby crystals and chambers like inside a heart. So, informing Renita's addiction are the ravages of her experience and inheritance. She says near the end of the book, I guess it's a lifelong project trying to be well. And it is for all of us. And the generative resources around and within her, though, can be discovered and retrieved. We're all left to grapple with the echoing losses of our lives, but our bodies and our vision and our voices can be reclaimed. In our hearts, alongside the losses, our abundance and possibility. The beauty around and within and between us belongs to us, and we may find our hands filled, perhaps through memory and imagination, or through the practice of writing, as has been true for me, with what we need. It may be something everyday or seemingly small or ordinary on the outside and wondrous within. Thank you. Okay.
I've talked Helen into taking one question, but I want to thank her. Let's give her another round of applause. That was really wonderful. And she is going to stay for a few minutes downstairs, so you will have, for those who can't ask questions right now, you'll have a chance to meet with her in the reception. I can tell you, I've read the novel. It is rich and evocative and wonderful. I highly recommend it. And we do have copies for sale at the back of the church, and I think Helen would be able to sign it for you. There's a few copies of my book, too, just so you know. And the title, just so you know, yes, every day something has tried to kill me and has failed, comes from the Lucille Clifton poem, Won't You Celebrate With Me, that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. I think it could be an epigraph for the whole day, right, for Black women. Every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. So one question, and then we will close out with Dr. Karen. Any one question? Who has a burning question?
You can also just let it sit.
Or you can let it sit, or I could ask one, but you, yes.
Yeah. So the question was, can I talk a little about the process of going to law school, becoming a lawyer, and then becoming a fiction writer? And was there a pivotal moment or an awakening? And was there a second? And what about legal training? Yeah. So I think it was always a wrong decision for me, honestly. And when I was in law school, I was the pre-law advisor at one of the undergraduate houses at Harvard, and I saw a lot of students, make that move, but just kind of out of default or not in a very informed way. And of course, there's so much the work you do, civil rights work, and the work my father did. There's plenty of just life-changing, amazing work to be done, but it just wasn't really my gift. And I think although my father didn't articulate an expectation that I go, and another thing that I suppose is important to the story is that he went to Harvard Law School graduated in 1949 when there were no women there yet. There were 3 black men there. And so he was this sort of trailblazer, and I think I must have been trying to please him or by following him there. And that's, we talked in one of the workshops today about redefining what expectations of us and as Black women. And I don't know, I was trained to please, I think, like many of us have been. So, but my mom was a literature professor, so she embedded in me, I think, the thing that, has been most meaningful. But so I think I just didn't know, I couldn't sit with the uncertainty when I graduated from college of not knowing who I would be in the world and what to do. And so I filled that, by applying to school, and that's what I saw people do, and I still see it now. And now I think because economic times is so hard for kids coming out of school and trying to launch, and I have a 26-year-old son who's a visual artist, and I so admire him for not, just living with doubt and uncertainty and becoming, and being determined to do that. But I guess I didn't have that kind of, strength or understanding of myself yet. So, I took the LSAT, and there are no prerequisites for law school, so anyone can sort of decide. It's kind of like that. There's that Nathaniel West novel, Miss Lonely Hearts. There's a quote in there that he says, "It was as if all the loose objects, someone tilted the world and all the loose objects slid to LA." And I think, maybe like all the loose objects kind of slide to law school because there isn't a prerequisite sort of program. So anyway, but so I took the LSAT, then I got it, and then I still didn't know what to do with myself, so I went, but I almost didn't come back after the first year because it was apparent that it was, not really the thing I was passionate about and thus not really gifted at. So, but I finished, and I did, make a living that way for something, either doing lawyering or something law-related for 9 years. But I started writing right away, and I worked at a big law firm in Chicago, and I wrote a short story about a brother at a law firm like that who sells his soul to make it. So I don't know. I think if I'd been less unhappy at it, then I might have stayed. But I was so abjectly, unhappy and a misfit that made me search for what the right thing might be. So no, I do remember though I found out that you could take classes at Harvard College and get partial credit at the law school for them. So I took a bunch of humanities and arts, and I got some credit for them. And then for the third year paper, which is your first piece of work of legal scholarship, I wrote mine about 3 Latin American poets as revolutionaries. Octavio Paz, Pablo Neruda, and Ernesto Cardenal. So I guess there were clues, right? And I think maybe in terms of legal writing and reading too, you do become attuned to the importance of each word chosen, because one word can change the meaning of a document and expose your client. So I think that maybe is one aspect of the training that I see play out in writing fiction, and it's great analytical training too, I guess. And I guess the kind of lawyering my dad did was storytelling. He was a courtroom lawyer, and you got up there and you had to tell a story and convince the jury of its validity and truth. So there's storytelling in so many of our jobs in unrecognized ways. So yeah. All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening. And for being here.
Thank you so much, Helen, and in appreciation for both Helen and also for you, Kim, we have gift bags. Okay, so first I just want to thank all of our presenters. So please let's come together and thank everyone who presented today. Thank you. I'd like to thank our amazing tech team. That's them back there. Thank you, tech team. Our pastoral team here at Union, who did a wonderful job hosting us and supporting this event, both emotionally and in every way. Our planning committee, those of you who are on the planning committee, feel free to wave your hands, give a shout out. Thank you, planning committee. And then just quickly, our sponsors. We had many individual sponsors, so thank you so much to those of you who co-sponsored this event. We also had organizational co-sponsors. I'll just mention quickly, Simmons College, William James College, thank you, thank you. The RoboHub organization, of course, Equal Justice Society, and please, please, please do think about contributing additionally, if you're able, to EJS and also to the Sisterhood Project and also to Irene's Sleep Slumber projects. So anything that you can do to keep this in the community is amazing. So, and last of all, thank you to all of you for your persistence and being with us today. I know that Saturdays are tough and Saturday evenings are tough, but it's just so important for us to gather together for community, and we'll continue doing that. We have wine and some desserts and some snacks. The wine is from some vineyards that are owned by Black women and run by Black women, so we invite you to enjoy those and to have the books and to just congregate with us for a little while before you return home. Now more than ever, it's important to gather. Thank you.